Hello and welcome to Saturday Service, a podcast all about faith and football with me, Graham Boozy, in association with the Live Streams churches here in Southend-on-Sea, England. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Central Baptist FC manager, Mr. Tim Mann. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. That was slick as anything. You told me just before you're not a professional. I was very impressed.
Oh, well, it's all bluster, you know. If you talk a good game, it should be okay. You know what I mean? First of all, can you tell me just a little bit about yourself, where you find yourself in life at the moment?
Yes, my name's Tim. I'm 32, so coming to the end of a football career, which I always said. Everyone's like, "Nah, you got ages left," and I'm like, "Well, slowing down already." But yeah, no. I am in Chelmsford. I work in Chelmsford, have a family here. Moved here when I was 21. From a football and faith perspective, I've attended Central Baptist Church since I was 21. My mother-in-law finds it particularly funny because she recalls that I'd researched a lot of the churches, looked into all of the theologies, looked into their styles, etc., etc. And the reason that I tried Central first was that I found the football team on their website, which at the at the time, now I go see a website in 2015, 16 for churches. They've got a bit better, but not by much. So yeah, I've played for the team since, gone on to captain and then manage, and then yeah, become involved in the league. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
So I do this every time with everyone, but it's one thing that holds a lot of fascination for me is when the seed of football was sort of planted in your brain. And I was wondering if you could share with me, your sort of earliest recollection of football where you thought, I really like this. Was there a particular team or player?
My relationship with football has been it became very intense and a love, and I'd say probably the biggest. I always joke it's like Jesus, football, Star Wars in that order. Basically, isn't it? To quote Gareth Bale, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. But yeah, I actually hated football until the age of 7. I hadn't 7 or 8, had no interest in it at all. So not kind of dribbling a ball around from the age of 2 or 3 and all that sort of stuff. Really didn't like it. And then just one spring got into playing it, and that was I'd have been 8 because it was the summer of 2001, and had got into playing it, and then Dad was watching the FA Cup final at the time, which was the 2001 FA Cup final. I'll test you on it. Can you remember which one it was?
Oh, man. No, I don't think I do. Am I thinking about Liverpool, Man United, or am I?
It wasn't Liverpool Man United. It was Liverpool
Oh,
Arsenal. So
okay.
and Arsenal were 1 up, and in the classic arrogance only an 8-year-old child came in. I came in and said, "Dad, can you play with me?" And he said, "Not until the end of the game." And I said, "What's the score?" And he said, 1-0. And I went, "I want Liverpool to win." And he then said, "Well, you're talking about an extra half an hour, 40 minutes." And then I just dropped in, "No, they'll win in normal time," and then just walked out the door. And then Dad proceeded to watch the Michael Owen Cup final with the 2
Oh,
goals
okay. I'm with you now.
later
Yeah.
on. Yeah. So after that, just became obsessed. I briefly trialed trying to I dive into everything. I'm obsessive. Now I've got all of our stats for the team. Fortunately, I've got someone who's slightly more obsessive who plays for the team than I am in stats, but we've got a lot of that. And yeah, was like, right, this is serious business. I need to trial out loads of different teams. Could never bring myself to try out Man United though. I think even at that age, I was like, that's too far, basically. So I settled on Liverpool briefly, and then Dad got to me and was like, "Nah, you're going to West Ham," and then have settled on West Ham ever since. I had a brief foray. I know you're a Southend fan, aren't you? So I had a
I
brief
am
foray
indeed.
with Rushden and Diamonds, which is where we lived at the time,
Oh,
if you
okay.
remember Rushden.
Did you live in Earthling Borough then?
Nearby, so
Yeah.
lived in a town called Raunds, which is roughly nearby.
Okay.
So yeah, but dad's always loved football. He's been obsessed by it, but was a West Ham. He settled on West Ham mostly to annoy his dad, who was a Charlton fan. So yeah, then it's become this massive love of my life, basically.
I had a chat with my vicar. He's a big West Ham fan, and we tried to work on the basis that suffering produces endurance, to quote the Bible. Do you have any particularly fond memories of your time supporting West Ham?
Fond memories of time supporting West Ham. I mean, they're few. No, I always think it's really interesting. I think that as a Premier League fan, you can. I'm a West Ham season ticket holder, so I can't even claim to be as pure as I'd want to be. But I think as a Premier League fan, all these Tottenham fans complaining at the minute about what's going on and stuff, and I totally understand as a player. I totally get it how awful that must be. As a fan, you've not suffered. You've not suffered anything. I say that as again, I come back to my Rushden roots where we literally went out of business, which
Mm.
obviously is the big one, and there's a Phoenix club. But yeah, as a West Ham fan, main enjoyments would be. I mean, I really do revel though in the suffering. Having said all that, like my favourite memories are probably the cup final in 2006, Steven Gerrard's last
Mhm.
minute winner. We lost. Do you remember we stayed up the Carlos Tevez year?
Yeah.
My favourite game from that season was the 4-3 loss to Tottenham, where
Okay.
we were 2-0 up and 3-1 up, I think, or 3-2 up even, and we lost in the last minute to a Timu Tainio goal, who I'm not aware, with all due respect to Timu Tainio, I'm not aware of him having done anything before or since. But that's my favourite game, is in terms of that was the moment where it was one of Noble's first games, tears on the pitch, all of that. So the Conference League final was great, but actually I always go back to that. Like as an England fan, my favourite game was the semi-final against Croatia, because it was the point of like, no, we've thrown everything at it, and give me that any day over the kind of rampant winning and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's some, whether that comes from a biblical background and desiring the kind of like underdog story. There's something about that. So I'd say, yeah, that defeat to Spurs, the cup final in 2006, the last year at the Bowling was awesome, just for its like feeling like the end and stuff. And to be fair, this year's been pretty enjoyable actually since January. Yeah, we're winning, but it kind of feels like everyone's back together and stuff, and bonded and moving towards something.
Yeah, that was another point I had with the vicar, about the home. And do you feel like the club lost anything in that move? Or do you think it's a matter of, if the team's playing well, then the atmosphere might improve organically?
I think there's something. I think there's something bad about West Ham in lots of ways. I think that obviously there'll be people who are better read and better speaking on me to talk about the hooligan past and all of that sort of stuff. And actually, I've been in the stadium and felt only once or twice, but felt uncomfortable with the behaviour of our fans. And not to dismiss that, I do think though that one of the positives of West Ham fans is that they demand a certain level of effort, I would say, and if you give that effort, they'll go with you. As a general rule, I think there's an element of the modern fan who doesn't, but generally, like Souček at the minute, Souček's the main one I can think of who has probably got to the point where he's probably quality wise, although he's playing quite well at the minute, but quality wise maybe isn't there. But we want him in the team any day of the week. And I think, there are players who you see that redemption story. So I think that's the big thing for me. I've been in the London Stadium when it's been rocking. I've been at the Bowling Ground when it's been dead. And I think for me it's about what the team on the pitch are giving you, and then the fans meeting them there. And I think probably something we've lost in modern football as a whole thing is how much the crowd raise the players, but it's always a both together, I think, basically. So I think it's certainly harder at the London Stadium. I'm not going to lie. There's definitely an element of the sound doesn't catch in the same way. There's more tourists in general, but I think that's modern football generally. I don't think that's different anywhere. And I miss the bowling for the Green Street. I miss the communities around it, and I don't like what we did to that, as in moving and leaving that community behind. But I don't think that's the London Stadium's fault, and I think that it can have some great, like we've had some great times there as well. And you just need to build those memories. Like the Emirates is a big one. I remember when everyone thought the Emirates was rubbish, and now for some reason everyone seems to think it's really good. Time is a healer in an essence, isn't it? But there'll be Arsenal fans probably screaming at me that that's absolutely wrong. So yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Is there a particular, you mentioned Souček, you mentioned Noble. Is there a particular West Ham player that you just love and you think embodies the team?
I have to say Noble. I have to say Rice. As much as Declan is now obviously off doing his thing with Arsenal, like as in he'll always, he'll always be someone who came through our academy at the end, who kind of put everything in for us basically and gave us everything when he was here. Same with Bowen at the minute. Like Bowen this year has impressed me so much. In terms of me, I do love a maverick forward though, an Arnautovic, a Tevez. those players do kind of get you off your feet. And I remember Arnautovic once, we played Newcastle, we lost, which was classic, and he sprinted the length of the pitch and failed to make a tackle, and then basically got a standing ovation from the crowd. Like, as in, yeah, those things stick in your mind. I feel those things stick in your mind as a football fan.
You think with like Tevez, for example, there's that lightning in the bottle effect, isn't there? Because, for example, as a Southend fan, we only had Stan Collymore for not in, I don't think it was an entire season, but the impact he had at that time sort of,
Mm.
raised him to a status of cult hero. And I certainly think that's the case with a player like Tevez, for example.
Mm.
I don't know whether you model yourself as a Tevez, but your football playing career, did you play a lot before you joined Central Baptist?
So to kind of link us onto the faith element, I started loving football when I was 7 or 8 and wanted to play. Was Wasn't particularly athletic as a 7 or 8 year old. Obviously, was starting from scratch basically in terms of football, but I really wanted to play and was really keen. And I wanted to join a team, and my parents basically said, "We're not going to let you join us," because everything was on a Sunday at that point. I think kids' football now is much more accessible across the whole weekend, but at the time, everything was a Sunday morning, or that was at least kind of my memory of it, basically. And they said, "You, when you're old enough," which I took to be like 13, 14, basically, and can get yourself to football on your own, in some way. You, until you're old enough, you don't have a choice to make. You have to come to church, basically. When you're old enough, you can make that choice yourself, basically. Then when I was 13, 14, and had the choice, I, by that point, was, invested in church, wanted to be in church. So chose not to. And I played occasionally, I would say, like, as in the playground, like, was absorbing football, like, it was all I watched pretty much. And then at 16, 17, started playing five-a-side, played a few 11-a-side game, but really the first season that I played 11-a-side was at university. So I ended up playing for one of the college teams at university, and then have played every season, have played like continuously since then, basically.
Obviously, you spoke about how you came to attend Central Baptist Church. I believe you started playing for them in 2015. So I just wanted to sort of touch on your association with them. As a player coming into that, just wondered if you could give us a rough idea of the feel of the club as you joined it. Did you sort of get a sense that it was a sort of perfect interaction between your faith and being able to play the game?
I think that I came into a team, and I don't think I'm throwing anyone under the bus in saying this, because I think the guys probably would say similar, and neither of them play for the team anymore or manage the team. I think they were guys at the time who were probably late 20s, maybe early 30s, or maybe even mid 30s. One of them, I think they were coming to the point where they weren't passionate about football management. I don't think it was the case. I think they loved playing. I think they loved Jesus, and they wanted to see the value in it. But I don't think they lived and breathed football as such, basically. And I think that meant it was a challenge. We joke about like what was CBC's most successful transfer window a few times. Me and Ed, who co-managed together, and me and Ed just turned up at that point. So I was 21, he was 22. We both just turned up that summer. Ed made his debut a couple of weeks before I did, and then I started playing. And at the time, I think it was just I wanted to play football. It was a bonus that the church had a team. I thought that was really cool, but it probably was more about playing football at the time. I think, and I think that the culture at the time was they were really keen that they needed more Christians in. They were really keen that they wanted to do more with the team. But I think there was probably an element of, and again, apologies to the guys if I'm misrepresenting them, but I think there was an element of like, maybe this isn't quite where we're called to be at this point, or we're called to be in the team, but maybe management isn't necessarily for us, basically. Yeah, that's probably the culture I came into.
I think that's fair enough. I think that that happens up and down the country. And I think, the gentleman probably running the team probably saw its value as, in a sense, with the mission of the church, and it's something worth sustaining. And luckily they did. Um,
It's a really tough gig as well, I
mm,
would say. Like, managing a football team is really hard.
yeah.
Like, it's really hard. And managing a Christian football team, and then having in your head those cross agendas of being like, we need to be as professional as possible. Like, ultimately guys who play football, the majority want to play for a casual team, but they want to play for a competitive casual team. So basically it's like you need to get that right. You're then thinking, for me, I'm thinking, part of my mission is to show these guys Jesus. Part of my mission of showing them Jesus is that I want them to be in church, not because I want the conversion rate of a tick. I've got one more bum on seat and therefore that's all fine. It's that actually I really see the value in church, in community, in like living this life around Jesus. And therefore I want to do both of those things at once. And that is really difficult. Like that is really difficult to strike that balance.
I've been in and around grassroots football a lot, and my friend is a manager of a grassroots team down in Cornwall, and he gets messages right on a Friday night on the WhatsApp with about 12 lads all of a sudden are unavailable. And so I was interested to know you've got that challenge. And I'm not suggesting your team isn't committed or anything, but people have commitments, that come up. So you're kind of already battling with that a little bit. But also, obviously, there's I'm sure it's not written in blood, but there are a set of rules, sort of, aren't there, in the Chelmsford League of, there needs to be 4 committed Christians, 4 people loosely associated with the church, and 2, people that can join on top of that. Does that really present a massive challenge, or have you found that actually people are bought into what you're doing?
So obviously there was we had that. Phil then took over. I know you had Phil on a few weeks ago,
We
or
did
whenever
indeed.
this goes out, or whenever it is. But yeah, Phil took over, and I think Phil did a lot of really positive groundwork. And I think then Ed and I took over in 2019. One of the first conversations we had was about how we manage team dynamics and how we manage team selection. And I think something that struck me from listening to Phil's interview was his idea about improving players. And I think we took that on massively. So the way that we structure the team, and I think I see this as the right way to run an amateur football team personally myself. I also see it as, again, Phil talked about how in some way, and I loved how he said it, but in some way we try and model Jesus on the pitch. And I try and model Jesus off the pitch. And for me, I see that as part of my mission is to be as fair as possible and to believe in people. So really early on, we made the decision that we were, sometimes at the expense of results, we were going to select a squad every week of 14 players. So the squad grew. I mean, the squad today is, I've used 36 players this season, I think, in some way or another. And a few of them have been for 1 or 2 games, but most have been for 5 or 6 games. And we said, every single player that we pick on a Saturday morning will play 60 minutes minimum. Very occasionally, it might be 45 if it's a cup game where we might go out and actually we might have to bring on an extra defender if we're hanging on, or we might have to bring on another attacker and we might have to prioritize minutes. But as a general rule, every single body gets 60 minutes, basically. And I think what that did is, I know that some of the guys listening to this now will be saying that is their least favorite rule of all, because it means that sometimes we make changes when we're on top and we lose momentum. That just happens. But I think what that does do is that grows the group. And I think that what that does do is that gives people something to buy into. So I think that has been better for us than negative, because I think people know when they come, they're not giving up their weekend I mean, I'm sure, Graham, I don't know if you've had it. I've had it at uni where I turn up and I get 5 minutes at the end. Not that often that happened, but that happens with football teams because their desire is win, win, win. And for me, my desire was grow it. And I also think in terms of your church balance, what that does do is that means you're not reliant on your church players being your best players and therefore like being committed because they're your best players. They can be in whatever realm of that gap, and you know that you're going to develop them and they're going to get minutes basically. And we try and make sure that is across the board in terms of mixed abilities. Occasionally we get it wrong. Occasionally we say to people, you need to come to training, you need to develop and get to a level. But as a general rule, it's complete mixed ability. So it is completely whatever ability level you're at, we'll come in and we'll use you, basically. But I think that has meant we've allowed 16-year-olds from church to come into the team. Like my vice captain at the minute is now a 21-year-old who came to the church when came over from Nigeria and he was 14, 15, and he got minutes from 16. He developed, and we've done that with loads of our 16, 17-year-olds at the church who have come in and then have had minutes to develop that they might not have got at a lot of other adult teams. It's meant that we've had one of my favourite CVC memories. I had a 50-year-old dad on the pitch with his two sons who were 18 and 16 at the time, and he scored a goal from half the halfway line basically, and like that's I can't you can't buy that as a memory like in general, but it means that people are able to see what we're doing. People are able to go with what we're doing. Some people might not like it. Some people might leave, although I actually can't name you anyone who's left as a direct result of the selection policy, but it means you can grow from a church perspective and you can grow from an outside perspective as well.
Yeah, and I think to me, I'm a bit of a strange one. I'm a bit of a sort of football hipster. So for me, the idea of the memory of the father with his sons scoring a goal, I appreciate everyone wants to win things. I understand that, but also to me, that feels like so much more of a core memory. Almost, it means something more, if that makes sense. I was interested to sort of delve a little bit deeper into the relationship of faith with and how you apply it to the management of the team. So you'd be pleased to hear I noticed you did a couple of sermons for Central Baptist Church.
Oh, you
Um,
really have done your homework.
Oh, don't you worry. I don't get out at all. Yeah, and you did one that was called Calming Storms, and you referenced 2 Corinthians, which sort of speaks of like endurance, truthful speech, and maintaining faith in sort of difficult circumstances. And because they're quite core principles, aren't they? And I was wondering, does it come naturally to intersect that into your football management, or is it something you think about a lot? And I guess I'm interested as to whether it's like, oh, this is just a part of it and it's become routine, or whether you go away and you think I need to come up with all these things.
I think for me, I was actually just having a debate on WhatsApp with a group of school friends about what makes a world class football manager, basically. And I think when you think about world class managers, because I was basically saying I think there's a dearth right now. I don't think there's a strong high level of manager, which is really interesting to me because we lived in the era 8, 10 years ago where in the Premier League, particularly the quality of managers was really really high, and we were just musing about that's the level of nerd that I am as well. Musing about what makes a world class manager, and for me, it's about culture. So for me, it's tactical insight, great. How you attack teams, how you set up a defensive block, amazing. Like how you can, your charisma in a press conference, great, etc. For me, I'm less interested. It's about actually what you do around the place. So for me, and again, this will get, I'm sure a lot of listeners like will either roll them up or they'll be like absolutely with you. Gareth Southgate is one of the best managers of all time, like for me, because the way he turned around that culture is incredible. Doesn't mean that he's don't get me wrong, he's not Pep Guardiola, like that's not what I'm saying, but I think Pep has that as well in how Pep sets a culture. I prefer how Gareth does it, but as in how Pep sets a culture is amazing. And I think for me, I take pride in that's so ingrained in me as a person, basically around like I have to thank my dad's a minister, my mum was really active in the church. And I think the concept of fairness, almost at sometimes at detriment to yourself. And I think that is say unfortunately, like as in but in a good way, that is a core tenet of the Christian life. Like you have to be fair to everyone. You have to believe the best in people. You have to see the best in people when they don't see it in themselves. And I think that's such a core part of my faith and has become a core part of who I am, that then it does just flow out of me in management. Don't get me wrong, it can be really, really difficult. And I think that the dynamics around the, I'm going to say nonsense, but I mean it in a sense of like general nonsense, like we all do it, like as in the desire to win a game, the ego of, for example, there's times where I'm player manager and there's times where I will start myself on the bench even though I don't want to do it, or I'll drop myself even though I don't want to do it because I know that it's the right thing to do for the group. And it's not even that it's the right thing to do for the game. Like it might be that I can contribute more than the player I've picked ahead of me, but I know that it's the right thing to do for the group. It's the right thing to do for looking after everyone, basically. And I think that really, I find that really hard if you're in a run of losing games and you're like, we just need to win this game because I know that if we win this game, then it gets me out of a hole. It gets me more time to do the other stuff. And it can be really tempting to come away from those principles. It can be really tempting to just pick your best side, to not pick that player who you know is really committed and really desperate and it makes his week. But actually, you want to pick this other player over here who, because he can hit a ball better. And that's when it's hard. And I think that's where, you know, we joke about it because Ed and I do genuinely co-manage, as much as people will find that funny because they'll say that Ed doesn't do anything basically around like the stuff, because I'm the face of it. I do the team talks, I do the, message people when we've left them out on a week to week basis because we leave people out twice a year. But having a second person to bounce off who's also a Christian, I think grounds you in that way of being like, no, we come back to why we're doing this. And why we're doing this is that we want to be more than a football club. We want to have that principled approach. And I come back to, again, with Gareth Southgate, how he managed and turned around a pretty toxic culture was incredible. So I'd say like that's kind of where I model where we go from. And some people say, unfortunately, I probably model my football on him of being defensively disciplined first and then counter-attacking from there.
So, would you like my opinion on Gareth Southgate?
I'd love your opinion on Gareth Southgate, but I'm terrified from your face that it's going to be a negative one.
No. You see, you mistake the face. I always look like I've just received bad news, so don't look into that too much. So there was a point during the last World Cup where I felt like I was standing on a hill alone, saying Southgate in, because I tell you why I love him is because I've always supported England and I always wanted them to do well, but it wasn't until he came in that I fell in love with the team again and fell in love with supporting England again. And I'm forever grateful to him for doing that, because I found the team quite hard to like for quite a lot of my life. And Gareth came in and yeah, it just made me love the team, love those players, and just in a horrible way, it made everything hurt a lot more because when we didn't quite get over the line, because I suddenly cared again. So don't worry, I'm 100% with you
Yeah.
on that
I
one.
I remember reading seeing an image, and it was reposted by a guy called Linz West, who's from a very, with all due respect to Linz, if he ever does listen to this, a very dated Christian band, I would say, called LZ7, and which is potentially harsh. They have a very specific niche, basically, and I loved them as a teenager, but probably moved on past me. But that's probably as music should be. Sorry, just felt I should caveat that as strongly as I could. But he posted an image of Gareth cuddling. I think it was Uribe, isn't it, who hit the bar for Colombia, and it just, for me, just the way he did everything, and that World Cup meant so much to me. I mean, it was an amazing summer. It was unexpected, but I remember going through the team, and it was like the majority of the key players, like Maguire, Trippier, Henderson, Sterling, Kane, even, like, had all at one point or another been told they were not good enough. And then Gareth had got them together as a group and made them believe that they were good enough. And I think, same as you, I think, unfortunately, when the talent increases, and maybe again, this is probably part of ego and how unfortunately humanity is matched to failure. But I think as the squad's quality has increased, those inequalities, I felt like Gareth was struggling to keep them under wraps. I think that, I'm not going to name individual players because I don't think that's fair, but the ego, I think, of some of the current squad was getting out of control. And then it was at Euro 2024. I think it was the first time I'd felt maybe it is time, but not because I was interested in winning anything. That didn't even cross my mind. I was like, winning with Gareth would mean far more than winning with anyone else. But it was at the point where I was basically like, I just feel like this is getting away from him, basically. And when that Bellingham overhead kick went in, I was mostly like, I'm just relieved for Gareth that it didn't end like that, because he didn't deserve for it to end like that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I hope that history will, properly frame what he did for the team. eventually, and I don't know if I necessarily hold a lot of confidence that will happen because of the slightly toxic football culture, but
I think it will. I think you think about how's like Bobby Robson. I was watching some stuff on Bobby. He is so revered now. I know like Barcelona, PSV, Porto, those spells will say more about him, but in England he didn't ever really win anything post 1990, and I think how he was looked upon at the end. I think he will. I think you can believe.
and speaking to, doing things the right way, I was listening to another podcast called The Big Man Up Top, which has an amazing name for a Christian football podcast.
That is
Yeah, it's
awesome.
beautiful. It's a brilliant podcast, by the way. So anyone listening, please do go and listen to them after this, obviously. But they raised an interesting point with like Christian players and the dark arts. So a player that may espouse their Christian ideology, is it then wrong for them or a little bit iffy morally for them to the goalkeeper to sit down for 5 minutes and buy time and do all these things? And I was wondering that, how do you balance your desire to win, your desire to get the extra mile with your Christian principles?
Oh, you can give me a free therapy session here because well, I'm interested. So diving, yes or no? I'll just ask you like three or four yes or no questions.
Never. And because I watch grassroots football, you can just tell them that they're an idiot from the sideline. So yeah, no, I hate it.
Time wasting?
You see, that's a little bit more. I don't, because diving's almost completely obvious, whereas time wasting is a little bit fluid. I don't like it, but I get why you would do it, I guess would be my response.
Someone's just run past you in the centre of midfield and you pull them back with a shirt.
Like a professional foul. I think that's part of the game.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, you see, the mask is slipping.
Well, no, so that is I do that all the time. As in, I say all the time. You kind of alluded to earlier what type of player I was, and I thought you were going to ask at the time, and I was like, I am firmly. I've never been blessed with a huge amount of pace. I was definitely quicker when I was younger, and I'm not slow, but as in I'm not quick by any stretch of the imagination. Like as in, my game's always been distance covered, so I'm definitely Mark Noble or Jordan Henderson, basically. And there's quite a few. I mean, there's a couple of players in our league that I'd have to apologise to strongly because they'll drift past me and then the arm is out before I know it and I've pulled them back. And I always come home and I have such a crisis of conscience about it because I'm like, it is cheating, but it's that hard one of it's cheating within the rules, right? Like, as in, because the consequences, I give away a free kick. So I think with diving, it's that thing of, as you say, like you're trying to con the referee with time wasting and with shirt pulling or professional fouls, as in as long as you're not going out to injure anyone, you know the consequence, you're happy to take the consequence. But yeah, and it's part of playing competitive. But I don't know where I land on that. But I think probably the fact that I'm questioning it to such an extent probably tells me what the actual answer is really. But it is hard. I also once against Danbury, who are one you probably know are one of the like they're always first or second in the league usually. A few years ago, I handled on the line, so the Suarez famous one in the World Cup, but handled on the line at 2-0 down, got sent off, and then we came back to draw 2-2 all with 10 men, basically. And that one again, I'm like, is it all right? I think that one I'm more okay with, but it's hard. It's hard. The coming back to your question about like the dark arts and stuff like that, I think it's really I think it's really really difficult, and I think that that's just evidence that like we don't get it right. I think all Christians are, and all Christians who I would say there's very few things you can insist that all Christians believe, but I would say that one of them is that we're all fallible and that we all need Jesus in some way, and that I would say that that is probably one of the core examples. I would say that I'm not putting myself on a pedestal and like it's one where it's really really difficult. It is hard, and I think for the professional, the Christian professionals in the game as well, I imagine it's even harder because the stakes obviously feel even higher than they are.
As Central Baptist manager, I mean, I spoke to Phil previously. I just wondered if there is particular moments where you felt an immense sense of pride, and I'm sure that that happens a lot. But obviously, you won the league in 22-23, I believe, and And I appreciate that's almost like an obviously high moment and a high mark because you've been with the team for such a long time at that point. But yeah, I was just wondering what proud moments you have from your time as a manager and with the team.
We did win the league. We tried our best to throw it away, as I know Phil covered. Uh, yeah, what are my proudest moments? My proudest moments probably are not the obvious ones. So we have had, just to name a few, I think obviously the big one which we went through, we spoke about when you wrote your article a year or so ago now, I think it was, wasn't it? The biggest thing for me was the obviously Phil mentioned it on the podcast, so I'll name him here, but Phil's dad's funeral. If Phil's dad was our only fan, he was a man in his I'm not gonna age. I'm not gonna guess his age, but as in I probably could. But as in, yeah, we unprompted. I knew I was going down. I mentioned it at training, but I didn't try and persuade any guys to go down. We had, I think it's in the article, but I think it was about 12 to 13 guys on like a Thursday afternoon. You'll know, getting to a funeral, you have to prioritize it. Like you have to get the time off work. You have to get down there. And I think one of the cool things for me is a real journey that Central has been on generally, not just the football team, the church. And one of the things I'm proudest of is that, and I think when you think you've made this, when you think you've made it, is when you've got even more work to do. But I think that one of the core things is we're genuinely multicultural church, I would say. Like, as in, like, and that shows in the team. Our team, there are weeks where there are regular weeks where actually there's not one majority, or where actually the majority isn't white British, which is, and that's quite regular now. And I think that's something I'm really proud of. And at that funeral, it wasn't all one nationality of guys, and vice versa. It was a mix. And I think that shows the person Jeff was, but also I was so proud of every single one of those guys. And that's not to say the guys who didn't turn up I wasn't proud of, because I know there were those who would have been there. But we played again. We played the weekend after. I gave Phil the captain's armband, and we played with black armbands, and we came back from, I think we were 2-1 down and won 4-2. Which again, the result wasn't important, but the character of that. And again, I feel like it's just a Phil highlights reel at this point. I saw Phil score the 2 goals to win us the title, which I was really proud of, because obviously Phil had been manager before me. Like, obviously there's a dynamic effort. We'd done a lot of work. There was a lot of effort to make sure that he knew he was valued and part of the group, basically, when he stepped down as manager, and we wanted him to keep playing and stuff. Not that there needed to be, he's great in and of himself, but as in, yeah, there was a lot of work in that. And to see him score those 2 goals that ultimately were the celebration on that title were there. This season, we've had guys who are asylum seekers who are in the UK, and, not to get into politics, you can probably guess what my political views are from what I'm about to say, but as in, like, it's really hard at the minute to be a migrant in another country. It's particularly hard to be a migrant in Essex, from another country. And actually, he came on, and oh wait, his backstory is his to tell, but it was a really difficult thing, and he scored on his debut for us, and like things like that, where you just give people that moment where they don't think about how hard the world is. Jesus's love is practical as well as being this ethereal spiritual entity. Like, actually, he takes care of our physical needs as well, basically. And I think those are the things I'm proudest of, when I've seen players get better, when I've seen that example of someone who I know is having a hard week. And there's times where players, where we pick the squad, and we might pick certain players for certain games and certain ones for others, and people might question why I've done that. And I know all the background of what's going on for, not all of it, but I know a lot of the background that's going on for players. So I'm really proud of those moments. Or, when I see someone have a good performance and they've come up to me that morning and said, actually, this week's been rough. And I'm like, it's fine. Just focus on playing. We'll get through it, basically, and stuff. And those are the things I'm proudest of. So the league win was great, but all of those little moments, that dad scoring with his 2 sons, as you said earlier, that all of them add up to me to being why I keep turning up every Saturday and putting the cones out and putting the corner flags in, and yeah, all of that.
And I think it speaks to your desire to put Jesus and the gospel at the center of it all, and what that actually represents in a practical sense, not just in words. And I think that's just lovely, actually. I think you've created such a wonderful culture around it, so it's really nice. You've also found yourself being involved with the league on a committee side, and as a ref secretary. I don't know how much of a challenge that is to obtain referees at the moment. It's a bit of a thankless task, unfortunately. And I was interested to know, as you are a Christian team in a Christian league, your attitude towards officials. Is that something that is carefully monitored? I appreciate you might have red mist moments from certain people because it's a passionate game at the end of the day, but is there a set respect in put into the game?
I think that referees are an absolute godsend. I think that they are. I mean, I don't understand why you'd want to be a referee, like, if I'm honest, but as in, I'm sure a lot of people don't understand why I want to go and manage, 14 angsty guys on a Saturday morning, like, constantly, who are, like, suddenly blaming me for why things are going wrong. So I understand that there's that to it. I think that that is, if I'm being really honest, I think that's something we have a long way to go. To get structural about it, I really do think VAR has a lot to answer to in terms of referees. I was really pro VAR when it came in. I think that what I've noticed is, in my opinion, is that the behaviour of amateur players in game, and this isn't just talking about our leagues, we enter cups outside. We enter cups with any other team. We enter the Essex Saturday Junior Trophy, which is all the teams in Essex, and it is in our league as well. I see a level of disrespect for referees that I think is growing, and I I say that not to shame anyone. I just think that there is a view now that referees should always get the decision right, and I personally, my hypothesis is that's come from VAR because people watch football on TV all the time and people go, "Oh, well, it's ridiculous that he's not got that right, and that's insane." And that was the case where, obviously, in a pre-VAR world, but I think it was way less. And I think that that trickles down into the amateur game. I think that they have a view that certain players, not teams, and I think a lot of the teams do understand it, a lot of the teams do get it, but they have a view of being like, "Oh, that ref's terrible, and we never want that ref again," and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that refs in general would say that that is better in our league. I think they do say they're better in the league. It's not hard for me to recruit refs for Saturday games. They want a ref in our league, like they're keen to. We've got our cup finals day next week, and loads of people are really keen to be there and desperate to be there. But I do worry about where things are going with it, and myself included, because I think it's a subconscious thing. I don't want this to be an interview where it's like, you know, Tim's this wonderful guy who has this like I can feel the frustration bubbling in me when a ref makes a bad decision. Like, yeah, I think it's because we're so used to there should be certainty, there should be correct and not correct, and there's just not in football. Like, as in at a professional level, you and I can watch the same game. Did you see the Actually, it's a good example. Did you see the handball on Saturday at
Yeah.
West Ham Everton, Fernandez? I in no way think that's handball. Like, not in a minute. And I know I'm a West Ham fan, and I probably shouldn't have picked an example that was a West Ham game, but I in no way think that's
No,
handball.
the handball rule is, I don't understand it anymore, I guess, is my viewpoint
Mm.
with,
But and I love David Moyes. You don't need to. I want to get that out there. That's in on. I love Moyes. But Moyes in his interview afterwards was like, "It's a blatant handball. It's a real injustice that's been done." And I'm going, in what world is that an injustice? Like, as in what world has like Fernandez intentionally gone to punch that away? And I totally get it's hit his hand and it's directed the, but we're having debates about, pathetic little things like around like that, and I think that bubbles into the amateur game, and I think that's where refs are in a really tough position. So yeah, sorry, as ref secretary, I think that I message the refs all the time. I have communication with them. I have phone calls with them at times and stuff like that. I develop more relationships with them than just I turn up and play football and get annoyed at them if they don't make the decision that I want. And I'm really worried about the state of where football's going, basically with it. But I also think there are some great moments, and I think our guys can be called back to. You need to. The ref's the ref. Like, it doesn't matter, and we do want a high quality of officiating. We do want the best refs to want to ref our league because they're so important, and it really infuses a game when the ref's having a good game as well. But yeah, for me, it's a secondary issue, if I'm honest.
And as a committee member, as an external person looking into the league, I get a sense that there's quite a lot of buy-in from the teams and the management teams. And I personally view football as this excellent tool of ministry. And sort of through your work with Central Baptist and the league, it's an opportunity to share faith with other people and to demystify Christianity and put it into a setting that is outside of a church. Is that part of the ethos of yourself and the league? And how much of a buy-in is there with the churches as well? And do they view it as part of the ministry?
Yeah, I think there is. I think that one of the things I find special about the league, and it's not always easy, but one of the things I find special about it is that I've stopped games before because I either want to call out my lot for behaviour that's not fitting of that, and I've had managers where I've stopped it and I've spoken to them mid game and be like, we've got to get on top of this, like as in this isn't right, basically. And generally the other manager will go with that. Whereas I think a lot of times if you're playing in if we just entered the mid Essex league and it's not that's not anything against that league, it's just saying if I entered that league, I don't think the other managers would go with that a lot of the time. There would be a why are you making a fuss? Why is this happening? I think the other managers really buy into that and the churches behind them are wanting this to thrive. And I think that that's something that I think you can notice when the team has that because it can really you really see that desire and that spirit. I think we want to grow that. Like we want to encourage churches across Essex to do that. We want to grow the league, like as in I mean, we want to grow the league because we want the league to survive for a starting point. Like it's a great thing for us. When a team dies, I'd see it as really sad, basically. Like, and yeah, we want to grow it from that standpoint. But I think that yeah, the we're really lucky to have such a good group of Christian men. I'd love there to be a Christian women's league at some point, but as in like from a Christian men perspective, at this moment in time, really lucky to have buy-in. And yeah, I think the church is. I'd love them to be more involved. I think we're always trying to think about how we get church life more involved, how we grow relationships with the league. One of the ideas I've got this summer is trying to grow relationships between the Christians in the different teams because it's hard. It's hard being a Christian. Like, I'm not going to bleat on. It's much harder in other countries. It's much harder for people of different backgrounds and stuff. But it's not easy to stand up for your faith. It's not easy to put your marker in the sand and say I am. Ultimately I am different because my identity is in Jesus, and therefore there's sometimes that he makes me do well, he wants me to do uncomfortable things, basically. So we're trying to grow that. I think it's hard, but yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff happening.
I've already sort of touched upon how your association with Central Baptist came about. I was just wondering if there was, being a part of that congregation, how that's impacted you. You suggested there's been a sort of development over time, and I'm just wondering. I always like to hear about how a specific church has worked in your life.
Yeah, I love Central. Central is probably the first church I would truly call home. So being a minister's son, you move around, not super frequently, but you move around every few years. And I would say that when I walked into Central, it was a very different church. I think that the one of the things that I think people have said about Central, anyone who's come, and I don't know if it's a word from God or just a perspective of people, is there's so much potential in that church. It's a city centre church. There's so much love in that church. There's so many great people there. And it's grounded me. It's the church I got baptized in as an adult. It's the church I got married in. It's the church my daughter will be dedicated in at some point, I imagine. So it's going to be one of the key things in my life. And I think that, there's a lot of work that's happened to make it a reflection of what the kingdom of heaven is going to look like. Like actually, it needs to be a safe space for people of all different cultures. I think there's challenges within that. There's challenges to being a growing church. There's challenges to bringing young Christians in. There's challenges to having young Christians who are on fire and are desperate and then burn out, or are on fire and maybe pointing it in the wrong direction. Christian nationalism, for example, is something that I'm really concerned about in lots of ways. There's also the group where there's the older Christians who are going stale and are not necessarily where they were at one point because of what's going on. And I think what we're trying to do is marry it, and I'm fully behind what Central are trying to do with that. And I think running a church is if it's even harder than running a football club, basically. But yeah, it means a lot to me, Central, like, and it always will.
Are you able to share quickly any sort of bit of testimony about how God's worked in your life? Has there been any particular moments in your life where your faith has sort of carried you through, or had a particularly sort of pertinent impact on you?
I think my story of faith is I've always been a Christian in some way or another. I think when I was younger, I was probably jealous that I didn't have this huge testimony of like I was born into a non-Christian family or like this experience, and then God called me and this and that. I think I've always known that God was there. I think that my parents gave me a really solid grounding. I think that as I grew up, I became more interested in other things. So we talked about football a lot. Football very much has the potential to be an idol for me. It is something that I am absolutely obsessed with. My wife will tell you the sheer amount of football podcasts I listen to is worrying. But I think that I got distracted as a teenager with football, with relationships, with just wanting to be popular, like as in like being driven by a desire to be better. And I think what happened at university is there wasn't this big moment. I never stepped away from faith. I kept attending church at various points. Like I kept hanging on, and I kept attending churches that it wasn't really cool to attend either. I went to smaller churches for a while, went to big churches at other times, but I kept on holding on. And then I would say that in terms of testimony with God, I think probably first year out of uni when I came to Central was a huge part because actually by all odds, shouldn't be in Chelmsford. I work in like support services for children basically, and I got onto a grad scheme which placed me in Essex. I had no connection to Essex before, and the reason I got onto that is, in my opinion, because I did some volunteering at uni. I worked on a respite camp for children who were open to social services and offered support to them and took them on residentials away and such. I came back from a night out in first year of uni and saw a flyer on a toilet door. This flyer was basically to apply for this to to be a volunteer on this project. The reason it was on that toilet door on that day, because it was a day after the deadline, was because subsequently became one of my really good friends had gone out, got pretty drunk, stuck it on the back of a toilet door, happened to be my block, which was random. I saw it. I went, "Oh, that's a day late." And then went, "No, I'll apply anyway." Emailed the coordinator. The coordinator saw my kind of application and went, "Oh, go on, we'll sneak him into the pile, like as in one more is helpful. It looks like an all right application, basically." Then got on, volunteered on that for the rest of time, then managed to apply for this grad scheme that was really competitive, got onto that grad scheme effectively because of this experience, and then got placed in Essex, and then ended up at Central, and then met my wife as part of that. So all of that could be coincidence, but I think for me it was God moved through that entire situation. He put me in that space. He worked through my friend's drunkenness of like sheer eagerness to like see what he could do. He then worked through getting me onto this placement, placing me in Chelmsford in a place that I didn't know, and then went, "There's your home and there's your calling." And actually, my mum at the same time had been praying, and had one of her friends had found a postcard, I think, of Highlands House, which is in Chelmsford, and was like, "That's where he's going to make a home." And I think for me, that was, I don't know if all of that was coincidence. I can't tell you it wasn't, but for me, it was special in terms of being like, no, no, that's where I'm planting you. That's where I want you to be. And it's still where I feel called to be, both in my job, both in church and in football.
Just to end it off, and I promised I wouldn't ask this question of anyone again because every time I've asked it, right, it's they've kind of gone because I got an entire Bible to choose from, and I thought actually this is a terrible question. Why am I doing this to people? But apparently you're okay. So I was just wondering if there's a particular Bible quote or verse that appeals to you.
Yeah, I should say I'd heard it on a previous podcast and prepped as well as the other thing. So I did know, but I will also say these are genuinely my genuine answers. My favorite Bible verse is, "Yet not my will, but yours be done," in the Garden of Gethsemane. I think it's such a powerful moment of Jesus's humanity, which we don't always think of. We think about his divinity, and these Christians believe this crazy idea that his humanity and divinity met in the person of Jesus, which I find genuinely crazy. And like the idea that, you know, at risk of potentially saying something blasphemous, I don't think I am, but as in the idea that it's really powerful for me, the idea that there was a chance Jesus wasn't going to go to the cross. In that temptation moment, there was a chance that he wouldn't. And yet he said, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." And that for me is like, wow, that is insane. And I I just wish to show, I know it will only be a tiny fraction, but to show a tiny fraction in my life. And the other one is actually my wife's favorite verse that I've kind of adopted, which is, "In my Father's house, there are many rooms." And I think that to me is to bring it all full circle. I think the idea behind the blessing that God has given me, I see it as a blessing, and I see it as a calling that God gives me these guys who come into my life for a small period of time. And my job is to look after each of them. And I hope that one day we see them in our Father's house, because I think that, and I think we will, like, to a large degree. I think the seeds we drop with football and Christianity, and it's not just about converting people. I keep coming back to that, but the seeds we drop of people to say your father's calling you home, and there's a room for you, I think is really cool.
Well, Tim, I think we've reached a very nice conclusion there. Is there anything you would like to add at all? This is your any other business section. I don't know. You might own a kebab van. You might want to plug that. I don't know. But yeah, if not, no worries.
No, I did a football podcast at uni, but that's long gone. I'm interested in asking you two questions. I don't know if anyone's asked you. One would be, what's your favourite Bible verse, just to flip the tables on you, and the second one would be,
Panic.
the second one would be, I'll give you some thinking time.
I know it. What it is I have a real fear of getting scripture wrong. And I don't know why. I have this weird thing in my head that if I get it
Uh,
wrong, that's really, really bad. So
just pretend it's from the message.
I just want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
There we go. I've got it up.
And to be clear, that was a joke about pretending it's from the message. But yeah,
No, it's fine. I don't care.
yeah. But my second question was, I never really got to see Freddie Eastwood in a West Ham shirt. Do you think he could have been a West Ham first team player in a parallel universe?
Absolutely. So Freddie Eastwood appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He was playing for Grays Athletic before he came and joined us. And we've gone to the game as usual. It was against Swansea City. It was his debut game. And I was like, oh, never heard of this guy. So it was literally a bolt from the blue. And all of a sudden, within, I think it was the first minute, he scored his first goal for Southend and he ended the day on a hat trick. Freddie Eastwood, to me, I can't speak as to where that went south, if you like. But as far as I'm concerned, I think he had potential to be a Premier League player. And I think, and I'm not saying he was the next Haaland or something. That would be weird because wrong timeline. But I don't think he was going to be a superstar or anything like that. But he would have been a solid lower to mid table.
I wonder if he missed out on the change from the 4-4-2 going on out of fashion, because he was a little striker, wasn't he? He was in my head.
It
But
was a
yeah,
throwback,
is he
and
your Mount Rushmore of Southend players? Is he on there?
yeah, he's on there. He's on
Yeah,
there. Chris Powell is my favourite because Chris Powell was an amazing player. He played the game like a gentleman, and he was apparently a massive gentleman off the pitch. And I've always loved and admired him. So
great smile as well. But in fact,
beautiful smile.
I mean, I can't think. I always do this where I make a statement and then double down on it to an extent that feels unfair. But I can't think of a better smile in football.
Oh, it's funny. We had a little, for the benefit of the listener, this will go in, by the way, don't you worry. We had a little chat before about going down rabbit holes, and now we've reached a point where it's who had the nicest smile. Yeah, I think Chris Powell's up there, isn't he? I can't think of a better one.
I'll Google it while you're either thinking about your Mount Rushmore or coming up with your favourite verse.
I'm well aware of my favourite verse, listeners. It's because I do the church's YouTube channel. I have a great fear of getting things wrong. Mine's Romans 12:12. It's be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. And for me, that is how I'm trying to live my life. Before I came to God, I did not have any hope left in my body whatsoever. It was gone. And it wasn't a sudden bolt from the blue. I can't testify to this amazing flash of light. But little by little, every week, the people at the church I go to, I fully consider to be God's people. And they've shown me that life isn't over. And so this verse reminds me of that hope and to celebrate the fact that that has returned into my life. Patient in affliction. I'm a bit sort of black and white, so I consider patient in affliction to also mean pull up your socks a bit. Let's get going. Come on. And faithful in prayer, because I believe that's something you have to do through every part of your life. So that's why I like that one. Sorry, that was a
That is an
long.
amazing answer, because I was about to joke and then realised I couldn't. I was about to joke. Now back to the serious stuff about the best smile in football. Kante, Ronaldinho, Saka, Sterling, or Rafa Leao, who I've
Oh no, Liao's got. Yeah, that
got a good
is.
smile.
Yeah, no, I recommend a bit of viewing of that once we're done. Um, no, I think I'd stick Chris Bale up there.
I don't think anyone's close to Chris Powell in that personally. Maybe Kante, but I feel that's just because he's quite jolly in general.
Yeah, Chris Powell had such a rough deal at Southend when he was manager. It was a very difficult time. The club was falling apart at the seams, and
Was he in between Henrik Larsson and Sol Campbell, or have I misremembered? That feels like a fever dream that you had Henrik Larsson, Sol Campbell, and Chris Powell as managers.
yeah. So I don't think we did. I don't think Henrik Larsson happened, did it in
Oh,
the
I
end?
mean, I've really embarrassed myself if I think. Was he linked?
No, no. Yeah,
Have I completely imagined Henrik Larsson?
to use a term used by the kids, I have zero ball knowledge. So
He talked to you. Sorry, I'm
yes,
going back to an article in 2019. Talks collapse over managerial role. So I'm at least, I mean, genuinely, I'm not sure this would have been able to go out, Graham, if I'd got that completely wrong. I'd have been like, no, sorry, this is too embarrassing. The world needs to know I'm a man who knows what Henrik Larsson's managerial career looked like.
he was between Phil Brown and Kevin Bond, who came afterwards. I don't blame you for not knowing who Kevin Bond is.
Well, in my head, and I mean, I've been scarred by the Henrik Larsson debate. So, as in my head, he's had a coaching role at West Ham, maybe, but or is it because he's linked? Is he linked to Harry Redknapp in some way? Like,
Do you think, we talked about redemption arcs. I think you've just done yours, by the way, just to let you know. I think you've done very well there. Yes, you are correct. He is linked with Harry Redknapp, I
I mean,
believe.
that is, yeah, and he became a scout for West Ham. I mean, that is Championship manager knowledge from
But
2003, 4, I
Bond
think.
became a scout for West Ham United. Look,
Yeah,
you've recovered. Everyone's.
that's the mic drop moment. Kevin
Yeah,
Bond.
and that's the time to end it. But Mr. Tim Mann, thank you ever so much for your time this evening. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
That's been great. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, and your verse and that testimony will stay with me for a while. So thank you.
Oh, bless you. That's really kind. If you wish to find out a little bit more about Central Baptist Church, they can be found at centralbaptistchelmsford.org. The Chelmsford League is on Instagram at the CDCFL, and Chelmsford Churches League on Facebook. After all that, if you don't mind, you could follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Saturday Service Football, or at Faith and Footy on X. And I just want to add at the end of this, so I don't have to set the microphone up again in the corner of my kitchen, huge thank you for the support so far. It's been absolutely wonderful, really touching, so much appreciated. And please do go and follow and show some love to the people that have been on the show so far. Anyway, thanks a lot. God bless.